record. Okay, thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Robinson School Building Committee for Tuesday, November 4th. And take a moment for any public comment. Oh, hold on. Let me start that over because now the webinar started. And there was somebody in the attendee list. Maybe it was somebody. It disappeared. Okay. All right. Well, just for completeness sake, I'll start over. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Robinson School Building Committee for Tuesday, November 4th. And oh, now the back. Lauren. I'll take a moment for public comment. We do have a member of the public here, so if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand. Okay, we'll move right on to meeting minutes. So I sent out a draft of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, October 21st. Did everyone have a chance to look those over?
Mm-hmm.
Any feedback or edits? Or motions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, John? Did I hear a second?
Second, Kristen Lapp.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favor of approving October 21st meeting minutes? Dr. Chu?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
John Cunningham?
Yes.
I'm an aye. I don't see Kevin. Just a reminder, today is professional development, so I think it was going to be tough for Kevin. Jeff? He's nodding. Steve?
Yep.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Tom Wimberg?
Yes.
Michael and John Lepers.
I'll abstain with apologies for not being able to make that one.
No problem. Okay. All right, great. So today, let's start with an update from the OPM selection panel meeting. So that was yesterday with Dr. Chu, Lindsay, and I were able to attend, and we had representatives from Vertex. I think we spoke about this, but since we have a full house, I'll just reiterate that that was part of the MSBA's process to kind of, they give they almost give a script. Like I think there was 5 or 6 questions that they sent to Vertex to address. We could probably send those slides out to this distribution list if we haven't already. Just so you can see it, it's all a lot of the same information. And then a panel of MSBA, it's kind of a mix of industry representatives and MSBA staff who listen and give feedback and ask questions and provide some commentary. They don't take an actual vote, but they do issue a letter of approval after that step. So they assured us that that was on its way. I haven't seen anything come through from them yet today, but we expect that to be shortly, and then we will be able to put the final touches on that contract. Brian, did you want to add anything, or Lindsay, Dr. Chu, anyone that was there?
Everything you said was correct. I had a couple of takeaway notes from that as well. Again, some of the questions that are maybe off script, if you will. They commented in a lot of accolades for the district for the questions that you used during the OPM selection interviews. They thought those were very good. Just some reminders and words of wisdom, if you will, about making sure that we establish a clear framework for considering options, including ad reno, model school, kind of understanding the larger picture of some of the impacts that might happen throughout the district based on whatever the preferred solution ends up being. Don't be tempted to eliminate options too early, which I think is kind of a blanket statement. You always want to make sure that you vetted everything. They did make a good note about cost control as related to the enrollment size, given that the sizes of the enrollments that have been improved creates a much different building size, which obviously drives overall cost of the district and to the town, and eventually, where that fits in. to the big picture. And then just Diane Sullivan gave a pretty good synopsis of, kind of the project before us as far as what was submitted on from a statement of interest perspective, what the MSBA extended an invitation for as far as potentially consolidation, redistricting, and then what actually needs to be studied as far as, obviously, it's just not the subject and potential other schools included in the MSBA program, but all of the schools in the district. So just kind of keeping the eye on the horizon as the big picture as we talk about community engagement. I think folks in Westford are pretty well aware of what needs to happen, but just she put a lot of emphasis on that, which I thought was great. So overall, very positive feedback for the town and the district.
Thanks, Brian. Dr. Chu?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I was thinking from that meeting, which it might be part of your process, Brian, in general, as we do prepare for going through the feasibility and bringing it to town meeting, but I was actually happy with the questions that they were asking based on the communication that we've already done. So like the communication that we've done, even getting the feasibility study approved. So I don't know if it's part of your process to look at the presentation that we made at town meeting last year. Because when we come back to town meeting, I think it'll be important for us to be mindful of what we've already said. And I think we did communicate at town meeting the idea that there are all these aspects to the project, that the whole idea of bringing things up to code, the ad reno, new building, like we have been trying to be very cognizant of making sure that everyone is aware of the potential scope. So I appreciated them saying, we don't want to remove things too early, because I think our community is interested in making sure that we are vetting out what all of our options are.
Yeah, that's right. And going back through some of those presentations, exactly that. I think you build upon that, right? Where the next major community engagement or community outreach program is, this is what we talked about. Here's where we are now with the current progress. Here's the update as that all kind of builds, because you're continuing to build upon what you've already established, get into that funding build. But yeah, you want to go back and kind of reiterate, here's what we've laid out, here's what we've accomplished since then, here's what's new since then. Exactly right. I agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
Thanks. I think just one other note, just piggybacking off of that is, I think it was Diane, somebody had commented how the 3 schools that we've identified and why, and while we've articulated that to the community, continuing to do that. And this, what we have in front of us isn't as simple replace or renovate one elementary school. It actually affects all of our schools because of the redistricting, and I think the folks yesterday understood that, and it's exciting to think about the task at hand to be able to like work with the community and all the stakeholders and be able to truly study all of our options, but keeping in mind, like, why we're looking at Day, Abbott, and Robinson populations, and how all of the student population will be affected by all the options that we're studying.
Yep. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback, and it's especially coming out of a special town meeting where we're kind of always reminded of the types of questions that we get and the kinds the kind of attention that the public often pays to things like this, and I don't know whether it makes more sense as we go through. Well, I think maybe something that would make sense potentially to do as we kind of go through and evaluate different options is that as we eliminate options, we keep, I think it was kind of to maybe Brian's point, as we eliminate options that had previously been considered, if we keep some kind of a document with, maybe it's just like, maybe it's in a presentation or something that has the rationale for why something was excluded and some of the kind of the nascent or some of the specific points around that. That way, everybody's just kind of tight on why something was considered and why it is no longer kind of in the best interest of the community to move forward on. It's one of those things where it's kind of a stitch in time saves 9, and we might be getting a question in 18 months, and we're all kind of looking at each other, scratching our heads, saying that that wasn't going to work, but gosh, I can't remember why. So we'll have something to reference as we just really tight. It's almost like a ledger, just cross it off and list out why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
John, one of the things, in addition to the options evaluation matrices that we'll put together that, kind of put those criteria versus options and, why things are more advantageous than others, and you can start to see why some options rise from the top and others get eliminated. One of the things that we often do is also kind of keep that major decision log as far as this is what we talked about in any particular meeting. Obviously, you have minutes and stuff, but it's sometimes cumbersome to like fumble back through meeting after meeting, but just like, okay, on October, whatever, 11/4, we talked about this and eliminated this because of this reason, right? It's a nice little synopsis. Yep.
Yeah.
And we'll document a lot of that in the PDP and the PSR to the MSBA. You kind of have to go through and summarize why those options, why you chose the option you did, and thus why you eliminated. So that will be documented to some extent there. Yep.
Excellent.
All great points. And I appreciate any time, especially with something that, we have such a long road ahead of us, sort of, that it's always a good reminder that the public is joining the conversation at different points. And even though some things sound redundant to us, it's just always good to keep telling the story from the beginning and why things were ruled out, like you said, John. So, okay, so we're pivoting to look forward to our next major step, which is this designer selection. And the first real step for that is issuing the RFS. So a couple ways we could do that and review that and give feedback with Vertex. Similarly to the OPM RFS, there will be an MSBA template to use. And so, Brian, why don't you just open up to ways you've seen other communities do this process, and then we can get feedback from the committee about what makes sense for us moving forward.
Yeah, so we've actually seen a couple different ways. We've had committees kind of designate, a few people to kind of read it and kind of go through it initially, kind of set it up. Because again, there's not a whole lot that we get to edit on that. We will include most of the attachments that you included with the OPM as far as backup information. A handful of folks from the committee could review that, provide some comments. We typically do release it though to the full committee just to say, hey, last round, anyone have any questions or comments? We would have I think we're planning on coming back to a committee meeting to kind of finalize those comments and say, okay, everyone feels good about this. We're going to send this to the MSBA. The MSBA does take 2 weeks to review it, then they'll send us back their formal comments, at which time we'll incorporate those and quote finalize the RFS, which will then get publicly advertised. So kind of leading up to that submission to the MSBA, we've done that with a handful of selected people, kind of in a working group, if you will, work through all the fine tuning of it, present it to the bigger committee for comment, or we can just send it out to the larger committee for comment, kind of finalize it at that meeting. You don't need to, and you don't want to create like a formal subcommittee because, I mean, there's not really a need to do that, and then there's not going to be a subcommittee from a designer selection perspective. Like all of that ranking and narrowing down happens at the MSBA's DSP panel.
I didn't realize I had muted myself. I think that's great and sums up it. And just, I guess, for continuity's sake from our last meeting, I had been referring to these next steps in that way of those individual ranking and scoring. And I just want to make sure that that's clear from the record that that is not the expectation. I've since read lots of the MSBA documents about this next designer selection step. And we're obviously the whole point of having the EOPM and your expertise is how you've done it in other districts and leaning on that experience. So that's I guess I'm trying to look for who's interested in kind of being an active member of that RFS review. And if it's like, if we're, at a quorum, then we could just kind of hold the entire school building committee meeting on that November 18th and kind of hash out any feedback. If it's only a handful of people, then maybe it's kind of that offline working group and bringing it back to the school building committee as a whole to kind of lay eyes on it and then obviously to vote on it before it goes live. So let me start with some hands. John?
Yeah, I just had a question. Is this RFS doc something similar to the OPM selection document where it's a bit of I guess you might call it tradecraft, sort of specific to specs?
It's a boilerplate document from the MSBA. We'll reach out to the SDO office to get MBE, WB percentage requirements. And then really the only thing that gets manipulated are the project specific details of your particular project, plus any of the attachments that go into it. There's not a whole lot that we can change. We'll actually do the draft of it. We'll update the timeline that's in it. We'll put in all the information attached, kind of like here's what we think needs to go in there. But really what comes down from the committee's perspective is some of the special considerations for the objectives for the designer. And this is what we talked about last time, is obviously thinking about designers that have worked with potential school consolidation, redistricting, where they fall kind of in the public outreach perspective of projects, maybe cost-effective designs, things that we want them to be focused on, sustainability, some of the new energy code. Again, kind of what is important to the district is really what needs to get in there. All of the project background is pretty standard. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of decisions for the committee to make other than what we're suggesting as a timeline as well.
Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of going to like, is it a technical kind of document, or is it something where you're going to be doing some word crafting and it's going to be like open to public scrutiny, or is it more kind of a procedural technical document? Okay.
More procedural.
Yeah.
Steve?
I'd be interested in participating.
Thank you. Kristen?
Thank you. I would be interested in participating, and I'd also like to know from Brian if we should be getting our engineering team, town engineering team, involved in this step, just because they will be, knowledgeable about soil testing and geotech and the land in Westford related to the site design and layout, and they'd also be interacting with the engineer that's brought on board with the designer.
I don't think we need them at this point. I mean, what we do need to nail down the best extent as we can is the potential sites that a designer might need to look at. We might know that, we might not know that in total. But as far as involving town departments, I think that's something that's going to come into play once the designer gets on board and we start to kind of have those, every other week meetings with the design team as far as what they're working on, and we can start to pull in town departments and committees as needed to lend expertise. They will do kind of all of their site investigation and due diligence with their sub-consultants, and I would expect at that point we would definitely have direct involvement with all the town engineers.
On the site selection, if I think that it would be great that if we can identify or at least state how many sites that are known to be a potential site, there might be additional ones. And so to be more specific will be helpful. And this is a complicated one because of the fact that you have 3 schools involved and potentially that you have to at least vet each one of the 3 schools as a potential site. So it's a little bit more complicated.
Lindsay, did you have a thought right on there?
Yeah, if I could, just to that comment, Jen, our understanding, or at least mine, was that we only have to vet Robinson because that's the site that was in our SOI. We don't need to include Abbott or the Day existing site. The Abbott site as a potential site for the new building, it just happens to be a possibility. So I don't think we need to study the Day site, but I could be interpreting MSBA's requirements wrong. I think I think as a committee, we also, when we put together our feasibility study budget, we had hoped we'd only spend funds on diligence and design on 2 sites. So Robinson, of course, having to be one, is definitely the first site. Whether the second site is Abbott or a TBD site, I think, is still being fleshed out. We made some progress as a committee over the summer, looking at some possible sites, but I don't know that we've kind of put a final point on Abbott as being our second site or not yet. But
No,
if I'm
that's
here
perfect.
correct, do we need
That's
to
good,
know
no.
that and state that in the RFS, or do we still have some time? That's what, okay.
If you know, then we put it in. If we don't, we don't.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think what we've seen in other districts as well is that there's a handful, 1, 2, 3 possible sites that would actually work, but there's a bunch of sites that you need to do a quick cursory review to say, because someone in town is going to say, what about this field? And you're like, well, look at this, it's never going to hold a building of whatever size you pick, right?
Perfect.
So again, you kind of, that's something that a designer could quickly do with, some GIS and some concept blocks and things like that. So that's kind of par for the course. But I think we just say, with the understanding that it's going to be
2
the subject
sites.
school and up to one other site, and you leave it at that.
Yeah, and with the possibility of a quick cursory,
Right, and then,
a handful of other
Yep.
sites. Perfect. Okay, that's super helpful. And then just while I'm speaking, Valerie, I'm also interested in being part of the working group.
Okay. Let me circle back to Tom Wimberg. You had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm interested in being part of the working group.
Okay. And John, I see your hand.
Yeah, just to underscore what we were talking about previously, I think the nature of this project being very long-term in nature relative to other types of projects that we might be working on, and the fact that it's super complex, and we're likely now and in the future to have various sort of like either subcommittees or subgroups. That's like, I think, kind of where I was also thinking if we have some sort of documentation that spans across those for things like site, like we rule out certain locations and like the reason why we did that. So it may not even show up in that matrix that Brian was talking about, but it might be something that would be of community interest in the future. And they might say, well, why don't we use this patch of land that's over back behind this shed or whatever? We'll have rationale for whether we consider that or not. But we might not all be seeing and touching it, and those might not all be public documents because of the nature of the subgroups and subcommittees.
Yep.
Yeah, what I'll add to
go
that
ahead.
though is our intent, and typically how we would set this up is that type of information though will all roll up to the building committee, so that you would see like, here was the list of 12, these 7 came off for these particular reasons, we're now talking about these 5. Those are things that, again, if we might work with a working group on a weekly basis to say, can you guys go out in town and figure out what those 12 are? The designer can look at them, the designer will look at them, but all that information on a decision basis like that would come up to a building committee meeting for the transparency and documentation. Yeah, I don't think the intent of any of the, working groups, if you will, would not be to make those major decisions. It'd be just to organize the logistics to bring the information forward to the building committee.
Great. I think that's really helpful
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got Steve, Kristen, Lindsay, and Tom so far. Chris, I know you had conversations with Kevin. Do you think he's more about this step with the RFS or like later with the designer step?
I based on the conversations, I think he's really interested in being a part of when we're reviewing the designer information more so than the development of the RFS, but I know either one of us are happy to help where help is needed.
Okay, great. So we are, my understanding is that we have 12 official slots, so quorum would be 7. We are under that, so I think we can follow, even if we hold a spot for Chris/Kevin in the RFS, we'd be under that for a working group to provide feedback on that RFS. Lindsay?
So just a question, is this working group for just the review and feedback of the RFS, or is it intended to be a working group for the duration of the feasibility study and other tasks as needed?
I mean, at this point, we need, if we want to do a working group to review the RFS, it'd be just for the RFS. When we move in the design, it typically ends up being kind of, superintendent or principal, obviously from an educational perspective, someone potentially from town administration, just to kind of coordinate logistics of the town, like those departments we talked about. And then usually a representative or 2 from the building committee, just to kind of keep a finger on the pulse. Along with us and the designer, that 4 or 5 person group, if you will, is kind of like the day-to-day, week-to-week operational of moving the project forward, with obviously those audiences flexing as we might bring in someone from engineering or someone from IT or finance department or something to we'll talk through anything that we might have. And then the goal would be, that group during design would then roll all these major presentations and decision points up to the building committee, so that major decisions will be made at that level.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So right now, I think it's really about, does someone want to dig into the RFS? It's not a big lift. Over the next week or so, we get a draft out to the full committee, basically. Full committee reviews it on the 18th, says, okay, we've got everything we think we need in there. We're going to send it off to the MSBA. And that's really the extent of like the RFS, if you will. We'll get the comments back from the MSBA in December, finalize it, and be ready to post, advertise right at the end of the year there.
Okay. So the working group is intended to be fluid. We can roll people on and off of it as needed, depending on what the subject matter is.
Yeah, and during the design, like I said, the anchors, if you will, from the district's perspective, is typically someone from the education side of things, someone from town management side of things, and perhaps a representative from the building committee that's somewhat consistent. So it's like three people, 4 people tops, and then you roll people in and out based on subject matter.
Perfect. Okay, that's helpful.
And Lindsay, we're doing that right now for the library, rolling people in and out on our calls when we were doing the design, and now when we're in construction.
Got it. Different individuals. Okay, that's a good way of doing things. I like it.
Jim, did you have something to add?
Yeah, the one thing that I want to make sure is that from whether it's a school committee or from the superintendent's office, in terms of educational goal, that whatever that might be, if there is if there's a particular pedagogy that you would like to have the designer to be aware of, that you want to have, then it should be in the RFS. In some way, sort of like the clearer you state your goals, the better the designer you will pick, because the right people would respond to that.
Okay, good feedback.
Then I guess Kevin or I should be reviewing the RFS as well.
Okay. Great. Okay, so I think from that, it sounds like the draft RFS, that Vertex can update some of the dates and stuff to the draft RFS, and send that to the full committee, but then this working group could meet between now and when it gets sent to the MSBA. And then I think it sounds like really just the full committee only needs to meet in December before it goes live to give the final stamp on it, because if it's going to be in your email, even if you're not on the working group, but you have specific, like you have your eyes on it, but then that working group can meet whenever they want. And the school building committee still has that decision point and that vote on it. Looks like according to the draft timeline, it would be December 9th, which is perfect, a Tuesday. So am I seeing some head nods that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, we can do it that way. Save you the meeting on the 18th. You don't need to have that as a full committee. If the working groups, yep, we're good. We've got everything we need in there. We're going to submit it to the MSBA for comments. We get those comments back. We'll bring that back on December 9th. And then at that point, good to go.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense and is a little bit more efficient, because there's not a whole lot other work that this full committee would have in front of us on November 18th. So just want to make sure we are holding these when we need to and not when we not when we don't. And if anybody saw the agenda, I was just trying to word it in a way that if there was consensus to authorize a full official subcommittee, I wanted to make sure that was clear from the agenda so that we could take that step of authorizing today and not miss that that cadence of doing that. So great. Okay, so I think some of this is kind of it's kind of covered from the discussion we just had, but I just wanted to also open that up to that next major step beyond the RFS, which is reviewing the designer proposals. So, and just because of my misunderstanding from before about individually ranking those, Brian, could you just give a little bit of commentary about how that process will work and how that feeds into the designer selection panel, so that just really making clear that the district does not pre-rank those.
That's right. And actually, I'll share, I got a couple slides, I think, just to kind of go through what we talked about. Can everyone see those? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about the designer selection process at the last meeting. So unlike we talked about, unlike the OPM, the district participates in designer procurement. It's really officiated by the MSBA designer selection panel, which is that 16-member panel. The district will have 3 members of that 16-member panel, typically chief executive, which is town administration, a mayor, et cetera, superintendent, and then a representative of the school committee or other designations from the school building committee. So typically there's the 3 folks. So in this case, Kristen, Dr. Chu, and then whoever else from the school committee or another representative would be the 3. We'll issue the RFS like we talked about. We'll get approval to issue that and publicize it from the MSBA. All the designers are pre-qualified by the MSBA, have their MCPPO certification. The Supplier Diversity Office is going to determine MBA WB goals for those teams, for those designer teams. We cannot pre-rank those firms. We can discuss the submissions and highlight anything that we liked or disliked. That information then is given to the 3 representatives, and the 3 representatives represent the district kind of with an independent vote at the designer selection panel. So typically what we've done in the past is when the designer responses come in, we simply notify the building committee, hey, we received 15 of them. Vertex will lead all of the reference checking kind of reviews, make sure everything is up, is included. So it's a actual response. And then typically we can distribute that to a full committee for your review, and then just say any comments back from the committee by a certain date, which would lead up into a designer selection panel with the 3 representatives attending those meetings. Right now, the way our schedule is set up is those meetings would be targeted in February. The 2 designer selection panel meetings the MSBA has on the calendar is February 10th and the 24th of 2026. That first meeting, all of the designers get presented the discussion, including input from the 3 district representatives. They then shortlist those firms that they believe are the top 3 or top 4. And then the second meeting is an interview in which the designers would come in and actually present. And then the selection panel, all 16 members vote, including 1 individual vote from all of the district members. The highest ranked designer is then selected by the DSP, and then the town and district, with our help, will negotiate fees and scope, including those fees with the highest ranked firm. So there is not like the OPM where you're shortlisting on your own and then interviewing on your own and then submitting a choice to the MSBA. We're able to review and discuss, but then the 3 representatives go and kind of carry that information forward as they submit their votes for the designer that they feel best would meet the district's need.
I want to make sure and pause there because it is a bit different and might be totally different based on, our experience with the library project and everything. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that next process. Dr. Chu?
So Brian, I have 2 questions. Are those in-person meetings then, if that's the case? They were like working?
No, they've been Zoom, the last few that I've attended.
Okay. And so I guess I'm just curious from your experience what that shortlisting process looks like then. If we're going in as individual members, but we're representing the district and we're not allowed to pre-rank them, and the other members from the MSBA that are on that panel, I'm assuming then that they're also not pre-ranking anything. So they're all just looking at this, and we're looking at this all together and just talking about the submissions. What protocol has the MSBA used to shortlist?
They rank everyone gets their first, second, and third place vote, and that has points associated with it. So then the firms accumulating the highest amount of points become your first, second, and third ranked firms. So if the district all goes in and has 3 first place votes for the same designer, obviously they're accumulating a lot of points from the district presumably other folks in the DSP will have the similar opinion based on their review of the information, as well as understanding the district's, desire to have that as their first ranked designer. So that's typically how it happens. So at the end of the day, like the district would go in, hopefully with a unified, here's 1, 2, and 3, or one, everyone's pretty close with the top 3 firms. Obviously, if everyone agrees on who they believe is the strongest firm, and everyone has the same vote for number 1, that's a lot of points for that designer to potentially be the number 1 ranked firm. That's really how they shortlist it. Chin, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but that's generally how it works.
I do want to add a couple of things into here is that, and the designer selection panel would invite the district representative to speak. Usually it's one person represent the 3. And that in a way you get to argue for your favorite team in this case. And the better you define the goal in the RFS, then you can better justify why firm A is a better choice for us than firm B. Does that make sense? Sort of you in your request for service, you clearly identify here are the goals and these are the characteristics that we are looking for the design firm to have. From there, then you or the 3 representative can say to the rest of the designer selection panel that we prefer these firm because of their whatever match to the goals that is stated in the RFS.
So you're really,
I guess I'm just struggling with how that is not pre-ranking.
It is pre-ranking, but you're not officially supposed to do that. How's that?
Yeah, they actually during the meeting, they actually have a matrix that someone is actually keeping scores with who gets the first place vote, and you're actually tallying like in real time, like if we try to keep up with as much as we can, tallying in real time, like where the points are coming in. You can see the firms moving up and down, which obviously can sway some decisions later in that process. But that's why if, we like, to Tim's point, if you can get the RFS very clear, then there's going to be responses that, float to the top where and then you're able to go in there with kind of a unified, this is the top 3 firms that we like. You accumulate the most points for the district for those firms. And it becomes very clear that you would be happy with, any of those firms, because would be your number 1 choice.
So we clearly do our homework. We
That's
clearly
correct.
know what our goals are. We
Yep.
clearly talk about this and know how we're representing our building committee. We just, as a committee, we are not officially ranking and voting on anything.
Exactly.
That's correct.
You
So
got
we'll solicit back from everybody, and just, they don't want to say this is my number 1, this is my number 9. They say this firm jumped out at me because of this. I really liked how this firm addressed this. You kind of get a sense of every member's likes or dislikes. Sometimes you don't get any comments back from members, which is what it is. They trust the 3 representatives to kind of do it as well. So, and we get to bring in our experience as well, talk to you about who we've worked with, et cetera. So we'll do all the reference checks. We'll get that feedback. Obviously, most reference checks end up being pretty good, but we can also, look at other contacts that we have that have maybe worked with them. But yes, 100% right. Do your homework, get all the information you can, give that to the 3 representatives, and they vote and represent the district.
And I'm going to use a small example of that. Let's just say that you want a firm that does a cost-effective design then you put that in there. Then if the firm actually comes in and the firm that, if let's say a firm comes in that has more of their project is in the expensive side, then you can argue. Then you can make then you can argue this is not who we want because of. With a backup information.
So
And we will provide you with the information as much as we can.
Perfect.
So I think that's really helpful ahead of the RFS, because it
Yes.
sounds like however intentional we can be in making those priorities in the RFS clear, that then becomes leverage in the DSP.
Right.
So,
And then whether it's energy efficiency, indoor air quality, I used to be an architect, so I know what those things are. And so I can, the more you write down what your goals are,
yeah,
Even, and we will help you, and then, you know, you can just, it could be aspirational versus, and then we can work it out sort of like, and so that you have, because then you will have the best match of
Right.
at the end of the process.
Right. Okay. Thank you for all of that. I'm seeing some head nods. I just want to make sure like that even if you're not on the RFS working group, that you're understanding the next couple steps so that we can all see how it ties together. Okay. Okay, so and your the other piece I heard there was, you know, at some point this building committee will sort of authorize or approve those 3 representatives, but that sounds like that could happen maybe later in like January. It doesn't, I don't think we have to know that. One thought I had as you were describing that timeline is I know at least with the OPM RFS, there was something about like if once we had the sooner we had our draft RFS, we got like in line quicker for the OPM evaluation like meeting date. So we might want to check on that, and if that's possible, to just, because a lot of this hinges on those February dates, right? So I feel like we've found out almost whatever, a learning experience that like we can't just pick the dates we want. You know, they like sometimes they have slots already full, or they, you know, you kind of get at the back of the line. So maybe as soon as we hear, Krista, I know you've been the main point of contact with the MSBA. So if we do hear from them with that letter approving Vertex, that maybe we can follow right up with a quick follow-up question to say, you know, how do we get in line for the February meetings, to just to make sure that all of that is clear.
Sure. Yeah, if it's not on the timeline that Maria sends, I'll definitely ask that.
Okay.
We can also check in with the
Yeah.
DSP, their administrator, to see where they know what their backlog or
Right.
what they have, where they are, whether they are 3 meetings out or 4 meetings out. They can
Okay.
give us that piece of information.
That'd be
Great.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
could coordinate directly with Maria too. We just had
Right.
that on another one of our projects. So I know that they were booking for I believe the first
What's
meeting in
Hemingway's
January.
schedule like?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm looking up. I think because
Right.
that ended up happening. Framingham actually had a couple delays in getting the RFS out the door because they needed city council to review it for whatever reason, which kind of delayed it. So they actually ended up missing the one that they were targeting and got bumped to the next one. So
Okay.
that just happened. So I
Yeah.
think we're on a good schedule, but you know, Kristen wants to reach out, but then we'll be in direct contact with Maria kind of from here on out as well. So we'll keep everybody abreast of that. And
Great.
Kristen,
we'll keep, but you're right. We'll keep it. This is what we're targeting, but they actually won't slot it in until the RFS
Yeah.
is finished.
Right. In hand or something. Yeah.
That's right.
They have their own sort of timelines.
That's
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
Kristen, can I ask you to, as a procurement side of the things, the RFS will become part of the contract with just like the OPM RFS RFP become the part of the contract. So therefore that the RFS will become part of the contract with the designer. So I want to make sure that whatever the town side requirement in terms of whether you need the town's attorney or whoever review, I just want to make sure that we have all we meet all the requirement on the town's requirement, and so that we don't delay the process.
Yeah, we'll, as soon as I get that letter from Maria, I will also send that to our town attorney who's been reviewing all of our contracts to line them up. We did the same for the OPM selection to make sure we met those timelines. So thank you for that reminder.
Okay.
Great. And then we can also check against select board meetings or school committee meetings if we want those votes as part of it, right?
MSBA does not require for this particular process. This is SBC's responsibility, and they do not require you to do a check. That would be up to the committees at your discretion if you want their blessing or support.
Right, so that's before the submittal for it to go out if we want the select board to review or to just support it. We will need the select board approval to sign the contract with the
Sure.
designer.
Which is much later. Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, great. Okay, all that sounds great. John?
Valerie, I just wanted to circle back around and make sure, did you get what you needed for the RFS subcommittee?
Yes.
Or do you still need more people? Okay.
No, so the consensus there was I have 5 people down to fill that as a working group. And this is a great sort of wrap up summary. So the next steps are that Vertex is going to draft the RFS and plug in the sort of the boilerplate stuff with the dates. That full draft will be sent to the entire school building committee at some point between now and, well, sort of as soon as possible if it impacts our timeline with the MSBA, but now in the next week or two, that working group will meet offline and review the RFS and dial into what priorities and specific things for our project that we want to weave into that and send that off to the MSBA for their review, which takes about 2 weeks. The MSBA might have comments that those comments can get reviewed by the working group. Once the working group feels like it's in a final shape, that can come back to the school building committee, and the school building committee will take a vote to authorize that before it gets published, probably December 9th. Okay. Whew. I feel like I finally I'm learning so much. Okay, so anything else we've missed, or I mean that actually ties into our last agenda item about future meetings. So this full committee won't meet until probably December. I feel like everything has got a little asterisk of like tentative based on MSBA, but December 9th, please block off on your personal schedule as a placeholder at our usual time. And that would probably be when we are doing a final pass on the RFS and voting on that. I don't see that this full group would meet again before then. Chin, did you have something to add?
This is not for the SBC, but I need to make a request for the Valerie that as the co-chair of the school committee, I need to remind you that eventually the school committee have to take a vote on the enrollment because it is both the number and as well as the grade configuration. So therefore, we need to make sure that we answer any concern and any and all concern that they have. And we need to we need to start thinking about when to go there and what are the issues that we have to address in the enrollment side.
Okay.
And so this is a little complicated for the fact that there's the size, and then there's a grade configuration, and then there's the what to do with the remaining schools. So this is not a simple. So I do anticipate that there will be a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, and if we do this well, we would ease a lot of anxiety for both the school committee and as well as the public if we do the process well. So I'm asking you to start to think about if we can start out by getting find out what are the concerns that they may have related to the implementation of this particular project from the school committee, and then maybe even reach out to start to have some conversation with the public, and then I will reach out to you to start sort of mapping out some time frame, because we do have to make a decision by the PSR. There is a deadline that we have to make that decision. So we have to manage the schedule with the school committee's meeting as well as the SBC's committee's meeting. And Chris, this obviously the educational side that you will be you have to be in there. But I'm just sort of saying that we need to involve school committee heavily in this particular project.
Great.
The good thing there, Chin, is that again, we have been talking about the potential of redistricting and all of this
Right.
for a number of years. So it's not
Right.
a surprise, which is good. But I think you're right. We want to make sure that we're lining all of that up so that we are able to have all of those conversations and get, I think, the most current feedback from people, because there will still be people who go, what? Yeah.
And then using those opportunity as public meetings to get inputs and also provide the proper information so there's no rumors and no speculation. They actually that we drive the messaging with facts rather than rumors.
I can't underscore all of your comments enough. Well said. Okay, I think we've covered everything and we are all clear on next steps. So I expect some emails to the full committee that are keeping you abreast of the timeline and steps, but otherwise, this group will meet again in December. So just want to thank everybody for your participation. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thanks, John, and seconded by John Leffers. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take care,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good day.
thank you, Val.